Hello, everyone. This is Mark Intricate, and thank you for coming to our podcast. This is our Achieving Unity Success Formula weekly podcast, and I'm glad you're here. And I hope you're putting this on your calendar so you're here every week. We love hearing from you and talking to you, and there will be questions during the podcast. If you have them, please let us know. As on the screen you see right now, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see our Achieving Unity Guide. That is our Get Your Free Achieving Unity Guide now. Please grab a copy of it. It'll come to you in a PDF format. On the right, you'll see our Achieving Unity blog. That will have all the articles that I've written for our newsletter. So please look into it, read it, give me feedback. I always want to hear from you. Or, of course, you can't see up at the top. It does have the markintrican.com/ sign up dash newsletter. But please, I'd love to hear from you about the newsletter, the articles, and your feedback as well as your feed forward. Success focused solutions from Reality Focused Dynamics. Reality Focused Dynamics is my company, and we work everything towards success focused solutions. Because too many times when we see problems or issues, we don't see the solution, we see symptoms. And that's where we want to come forward, helping you in the process of solving the problem. To get to our website home, QR codes on the left, get to the landing page to contact me, that's on the right. Again, don't want to be redundant, but love to hear from you. Let's talk soon. Achieving Unity Success Formula. Welcome to weekly podcast number 33. We started back in October of last year. It is, again, every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Put it on your calendar. We'd love to see you here. We use proven, compassionate strategies to help you resolve conflicts and build lasting harmony in your home, your workplace, and your social circles. Are you tired of arguments and tension with others? Our 7-step roadmap helps you easily move from conflict to collaboration with ease. You want stronger communications and trust? Learn the communication tactics that unite you with all others in mutual respect. You deserve the respect. Let's get it for you. Let's transform conflict into connection together, achieving unity. Unity inspires homes, families, it shapes society, and it transforms workplaces. For anyone that is struggling with relationship challenges or possibly even parenting difficulties, challenges in managing parenting time during or after a divorce can hinder focus and impact performance at work. Turn that frustration into understanding. Sometimes we ask ourselves, what the frustration? Find value in your actions instead of reacting in anger. Why? Well, what is anger? Anger, anger. Actions not gaining effective results. Where is the value in anger? It's just not there. Have you ever been excited and told somebody else, hey, I saw Johnny get angry the other day. I saw Janie get angry the other day. Wow, it was awesome. No, it does not happen. There is no value to anger. We can come together and be calm. And I'll tell you more about that when you come to our course. Life happens in every relationship, from personal to professional, from parenting time to partnerships in the corporation, in the bedroom and the boardroom and every room in between. We can learn to embrace challenges and encourage a more inspired and inclusive future. Encourage, inspired, and include. That's the EII. There's more of that in my blog. If you look at my newsletter articles, love to get your feedback. Let's look at one vision, one goal, achieving unity in every area of life. The call to action. Let's ditch the drama. Let's get stuff done. We'll show you how to turn your life from a dumpster fire. I hope it's not quite that bad, but if it is, we'll turn your life from a dumpster fire to a well-oiled machine. Achieving unity is the path to stronger relationships, inspired leadership, and lasting change. And what is lasting change? Ongoing improvements, long-term value. Contact us at Reality Focus Dynamics today. You can get me at the achievingunity.com, which you've seen already, realityfocusdynamics.com, or Reality Focused alone, just realityfocused.com. Call me at 303-362-8733. And if you like it, you can also dial 303 Focused. That will get you to the 362-8733. Our next course, the 7 Steps to Achieving Unity Success Formula, Living Life Fully Through Present Moment Awareness. Next one starts on August 7th. It's a Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. It's the same time as this one, but it's the day later. It's a 7-module live online course and practical journey that I will be leading. You can transform your life and your career. Achieving Unity Success Formula 2-day workshops are now available. They can be on-site or virtual. Contact me about those today, because by caring, helping, and including others, we can achieve a much deeper sense of unity and connection at home, with our families, at work, and socially. As mentioned, this is a weekly podcast. Next week, we have John Chen. We'll be talking about the Asian Pacific Islander Month. That's coming up on May 7th. On May 14th, Alan Gatlin will be here about business ethics in a multicultural environment. It'll be very interesting to talk about this. Mariana Lead, she'll be here on May 21st. Me, my brand, and why. Who are we? What are we doing? On May 28th, Robert Butwin, relationships in a virtual world. What was the world before COVID and the world today? Much more virtual. Come back and let's hear what Robert can tell us about that. And then on June 4th, that turns 4 straight weeks podcast talking about the dad, the father, and parenting. All 4 weeks we talk about that, led by Michael Olson. You're going to be talking about the silent epidemic. When epidemics happen, but people keep silent and nothing is done. Please join us. Again, those 4 podcasts all about dads, fathers, and parenting starts on June 4th and follows for the next 4 weeks. In August, we will start this with the moms, mothers, and parenting. So all 4 podcasts in August will be about the moms, the mothers, and parenting, with June, the dads, fathers, and parenting. Come see it. Let's all work together. Today, I am very honored. Excuse me. I wish you could have been here before the podcast. Tom and I were carrying on a great conversation. He is so good at what he does. Tom Cobin, a former award-winning TV journalist. There are very few people who can claim they've been a public speaker for longer than our next guest. He has been appearing in front of others for more than half a century, from winning speech contests in New York City at age 12. Can you believe it? To reaching the state finals in high school debate. He went on to spend 2 decades in TV news and another 20 years in pharmaceutical sales and training. And his URL for his website is down at the bottom right, the https:// dynamicoach.com. He's a presentation skills coach. He has won some of the best, most prestigious awards in journalism. 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards, an Emmy, and multiple Associated Press Awards. As a national sales trainer at a top 5 pharmaceutical company, he gave workshops sharing his speaking and presentation skills with all of his colleagues. He now engages and enlightens others in keynote speeches, along with online and in-person workshops, as well as personalized one-on-one coaching. You'll want to contact him soon. Please help me welcome the founder and CEO of Dynamic Coach, Mr. Tom Cobin, who is here to help you polish your presence for impact. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here, Mark.
Tom, it's great to have you. It's awesome just to talk with you. As we were talking earlier, it I hope you receive a lot of calls on some one-on-one coaching because you and I talking just a few minutes ago. That was so beneficial and a lot of fun. It's great to have that kind of conversation. And especially with someone who has had what I think is such an extraordinary career. Wow. From TV journalism to pharmaceutical sales, and now you're in public speaking. What inspired this unique career path?
Well, even before my first college career was actually pre-med, and that didn't work out. And I dropped out for a couple of years and found myself a little bit. And when I went back to school, I kept reflecting back. I remember flipping through the NYU curriculum guide, the catalog, and I kept stopping on journalism because that had been my high school senior year elective, the who, what, where, why, how. And I just kept on coming back to it. I was in New York City, and of course, number one media market. I said, let me do this. I had public speaking experiences with speech contest and debate. It seemed like a natural transition. And I immediately took to it. I wrote for the Washington Square News, the newspaper. I was a photographer. Down the hall was the radio station. I was a radio music DJ, radio announcer. I actually started working for pay before even graduating from college, and then went on to get work at CBS. And my motivation was always the public interest. That is a phrase I think we've lost touch with. It used to be, I don't know if most people realize, news used to be like a required service to the public because the theory was there was a limited resource called the ultramagnetic bandwidth spectrum before cable. It was a
Yeah.
public resource, and you had to demonstrate your concern for the public interest by devoting a certain amount of time to news. Well, then we got cable, so that pressure was less. And then they realized, wow, this is not very expensive to produce. So you started seeing in the 70s and 80s expansion, expansion, expansion. And then the whole news industry kind of shifted. And I ultimately decided I didn't want to go that direction anymore. After 20 years, it was no longer. I mean, when I was in college, Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America. By the time I left the business 20 years earlier, journalists were beneath attorneys in public contempt and mistrust. And I dare say it's only gotten worse since then. Not entirely the media's fault. There's other forces at play here, but I just didn't want to do it anymore. So, full circle, back to my pre med background in college, I found out what pharmaceutical representatives do. And I decided to transition into that business. And here's how I got the job. I was a celebrity. I was wavy TV 10 on your side, Tom. I was the guy who did a lot of hidden camera investigations. If I show up at your
Oh,
business, yeah, if I show up with a camera you can see at your business, you're having a bad day. So, so everybody in that market knew me. I would get stopped on the street and ask for autographs. And I told the hiring manager of pharmaceuticals, I said, I can offer you something that no other candidate for this job can say. I can walk into any doctor's office. They will know me, they will trust me, and they'll want to talk to me. And I got the job. And that pitch, I think, in itself conveys an important thing about sales. It's sales really is service. You got to solve the need of the customer. And that's what the manager wanted, somebody who had those three attributes. And then I devoted myself in pharmaceuticals to giving the doctors the information that they needed in order to get the
oh,
patients the care that they needed. So, in a way, it took me about a year to realize it had come full circle from gathering all this complex information and doing research and making sure I wouldn't get sued for libel and then putting it out in a way that would benefit the public. Well, pharmaceuticals highly regulated, same kind of thing. Highly technical information, absorb it, synthesize it, boil it down, convey it verbally to doctors in a way that would help the public by improving medical care. So it's really more of a continuum than I had realized at the time.
that's very interesting, Tom. You're teaching me a lot as you're talking about that. And I like some of the situations that you've been in, some things that you've talked about, some of the moments. And as you were talking, I was just kind of running through my mind. Can you share a memorable moment from some of those early days in your journalism that still maybe perhaps influences your work today?
Back in the 90s, I became a huge fan of emotional intelligence. It kind of transformed my life, understanding the nexus between the neurological research and the behavioral, attitudinal. a psychological experience. And as I
Okay.
learned more about that, I realized one of the formative experiences in TV news early in my career was actually a great example of emotional intelligence. And it had everything to do with tone of voice. I was a producer in this really intense newsroom in New York City, super smart people, a lot of conversation going back and forth, sometimes really loud noises. Think of the movie Broadcast News. That movie was actually based on our newsroom. I could point to real life people that those characters were based on. So that I rewatched it. It was really, really quite impactful to remember that those days. So there's crazy scenes, and I'm getting my first experience as a producer, and you have to have plans A, B, C, D, and F when you go into the, to the control. You've got to be ready for anything. Losing a live shot, the satellite goes down, somebody gets shot, you've got new breaking news. So you've got to organize all this mayhems, and you're on your computer, on your communication, your earpiece, and directing everybody. Page 6 now becomes page 3. Bump that to section 2, and you're speaking really loud so everybody hears you. So I had that episode one time and it was crazy, but the viewing audience never knew. Everything went perfect. So we have our what we call post-mortem after the meeting. Sometimes we would call it beat the press.
Beat the press.
Beat the press. Post
Comes from the meet the press. That's kind of a play on those words, right?
exactly. Because you'd go into the news director's office and if things didn't go well, you'd get beaten up. So we have our meeting, and this news director who had been promoting me said, "Hey, everything went great, great." So everybody leaves. He says, "Tom, stick around. Close the door." I mean, I felt like I was about to be called to the principal's office. Uh-oh, what? I thought this was a successful broadcast. So he says, "Tom, remember, think of your anchors in that studio. It is pin drop quiet. They don't hear anything. You can't allow any noise because then it would go out on on the air. So it's really super quiet. And all they see is the cameras, the red tally lights, and the floor director going silently this way, that way. That's their environment. Calm, quiet, subdued." He says, if you come on the radio and you're talking in their ears and your voice is agitated on, you're going to like agitate them. You're going to upset them and they will not be on their game. So, once the mayhem in the control room closes, when you open that mic, talk slowly and calmly so the anchors don't get agitated by your tone of voice. What an
What a
amazing example
story.
emotional intelligence, the impact that we have on others by whether we raise or lower our voice, whether we're speaking quickly or more slowly. It's an emotional signal to others that we give beyond our words, the verbal content. This is the nonverbal elements of communication coming into play. And I learned that very early in my TV news career.
Wow. That's impressive. As you tell me these stories, I think of other things that come up. And as you were mentioning, or as I read earlier, that I received from your website, as us talking, you've been doing this for quite a while. You've been a public speaker for more than 50 years.
Yeah, I just
And
kind of dated myself, didn't I? Yeah, okay, I'm a senior citizen technically.
and we were talking earlier. We thought you were about 39 years old, give or take.
Well, I was 29 for 12 years, and then I was 45 for about 10.
Like that. You have a great sense of humor. But tell me, we've had all kinds of changes, and of course, for all of us, COVID, what it's changed. But in your 50 years, what do you feel has changed the most in the art of communication and how we how we communicate since you started in public speaking and television and being a speaker?
Well, there are elements that absolutely do not change. They're universal through time. But in terms of our communications media, one change, as I told you, is the perception of trust. And I think the other two changes that I have seen is that shift from public service to sales and advertising. We used to joke like, yeah, our news stories, they just keep the commercials from bumping into each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I started to be acutely aware of the aspect of emotional intelligence about trying to scare people into watching. Is there danger in your sock drawer coming up? And my attitude was if you use a tease to get people to watch that is really not legitimately based in reality when it comes to the actual story, you've cried wolf and you've lost credibility. And yeah, okay, short term, you scared the people into watching, you got the viewers, but then over time you lose the trust. There was one story which then really, really came into focus. Our station in New York was the first to identify the danger of salmonella chicken, salmonella poisoning in chicken. And we had huge arguments about this, whether to tell the people at 5 o'clock how to solve the problem. Cook chicken over 160 or 165, whatever degrees was. But someone in the newsroom made the decision, no, hold that off and get people to tune back in at 6. Well, the switchboards lit up. I've got my family sitting down to chicken dinner. Am I about to kill my family? So we had to scramble and put something on at 5:30 to say, no, 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 no. This is a danger, but all you have to do is. So that was an example of trying to emotionally manipulate people with fear just to
But
get them.
don't we see that a lot today? Sorry to interrupt you, but Tom, you're
No,
talking about how a lot of television operates today, a lot of media, I should say television, media in general, social web, the internet. Isn't that how they
absolutely.
do a lot?
And that is the change. Back to the question, what has changed? I think that is one of the key respects in which media has changed. It's gone from a public service to a form of emotional manipulation to sell consumer goods.
Yeah.
The second change, I think, has been the technology. That's obvious. Andy Warhol famously said, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. And he got it exactly right. Now, anyone can be an influencer and you can go viral overnight. So, there's positives and negatives to that. And the way that we consume media, I think also there's evidence shows that our attention spans have contracted, not down to 8 seconds like a goldfish. That's actually one of the myths that I bust in my material. Absolutely not true. And I've traced it. I can tell you where it came from and why it's false, but just know that is a myth. But yes, especially in the age of 140 character tweets, our attention span has dropped. But as you and I were talking before the podcast began, we are now realizing how important it is to focus and not just be attentive to those momentary little blurbs. You need to engage what's called active listening. Focus on what someone is saying. Really be sure you understand what they say before you respond. The saying is listen to learn, not to respond. And I think that's another thing just in our interpersonal communication. We don't listen, we react. And you were just talking about anger. Anger is a response and it serves a
It
function.
is.
I call anger your alarm. You have a right to be angry at certain things. So let the alarm go off. But then once you realize it's an alarm and why, take a deep breath,
Control.
calm down. Yes, exactly. And then deal with whatever that is. It could simply be in a relationship that you need to establish boundaries, that someone else has overstepped and gotten you angry. Okay, don't stay angry. Like you say, unity, align, let them understand why you're upset. Maybe you need to understand why they reacted the way that they did or why they did whatever they, and mutual understanding that leads to the kind of unity that we so desperately need
Really
in
need.
today's society.
You're so right. And that like so much what you're saying, and Tom, you just you feeding the giving the fertilizer to my seeds. And that's exactly what you're saying. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier about everyone has a right to be angry, but with every right, there comes a responsibility. And they don't, I have the right to do this. You have the right up to your area. When you start impacting someone else, your responsibility changes and it magnifies to where if your right is impacting someone else, it is wrong. And that's
Right.
why you have the right to be angry. That's right. It's just actually it's not gaining effective results. You won't get any results from it. Maybe internally you'll resolve something, we hope, but there is no value to the anger in itself. You have the right to make sure
Right.
you feed into that responsibility that goes along with it, right?
Exactly. And just because you have a right does not mean you need to exercise it. But even when you do exercise it with judiciously. Recognize you're angry, and then, like you say, find the solution through effective communication and collaboration and coordination and understanding and kindness and empathy. That's how you get over your own anger. Because
So,
I
so
love the
well said.
saying. Yeah, I love the saying. It's incorrectly attributed to Buddha, but I love the saying. Staying angry and expecting someone else to get sick is staying angry, holding on to anger Holding on to
Mm.
anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get
Someone
sick.
else. That is so true. And that people don't understand that, but it's almost like you're saying earlier about active listening. And you talked about focus, and that's good because for a lot of people, well, I am listening actively, but I'm still off somewhere else, or I'm still looking for my response. So I like what you talked about active listening, the focus on what's being said so you can understand what's being said, not respond on some culture, some learning that you have, but
Mhm.
understanding what the other person is sharing with you, right?
And empathize it if in any way you possibly can.
Well said. Well said. All right, let's talk a little bit about dynamic coach. Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely.
Dynamic coach. I like that. Well, you put that C, you duplicate C there. That's a wonderful way to do that.
Shared. It's a
With
shared C. It's unity,
it,
shared C between two
it's you.
words.
Share terms. And your humor is awesome. But as we look at that and looking at your career, what inspired the creation of Dynamic Coach? How does it differ from maybe other speaking or presentation coaching services?
I was acutely aware that I have been training in some form of fashion since I was a teenager. I was a yoga instructor in New York City and another market where I worked as a reporter. I was worked there as a gym as a yoga instructor. I've been a windsurfing instructor, rollerblading instructor, sailing instructor. I just like sharing what I know to elevate others. So I've been doing that throughout my career. And it was a natural transition for me. You get to a certain point in your career and you've got all this great knowledge and experience, but good does it do if you don't share it, if you don't pull it
So
out to the
true.
world? And I think how I like to try to differentiate myself two ways. First of all, my approach is evidence based. I spent 40 years researching evidence. So I don't start with what I kind of think or my idea and put it out there. I always make sure that I have researched the topic. And that's how I discovered these myths. I actually felt bad about passing on one of these myths that I had gotten in good faith in a slide deck from the company. But then when it was my name on it, I said, nah, I'm going to look into it. And I found that it was indeed a myth. So my approach is evidence based
Mm,
neuroscience. That's the first thing. The second word I like to use is experiential. There's tons of information out there on YouTube, anywhere on the internet about what makes public speaking effective, how to do it, the what to do. Then there are people who can actually tell you further, they can actually show you, they can model it, they can show you what good looks like. But can they get you to experience it? That's, I think, my differentiator. I call my workshops experiential because I've developed these exercises. In some cases, I've adapted them from stuff
that's
we used to do in college, college radio, use your voice, facial exercises to help you enunciate your words better, which we used to have to do on radio. All these exercises that you can experience. Oh, that feels different and uncomfortable, but
and
effective.
may not be what they were thinking in their mind when they first thought about it either, right? When they were talking about that, okay, I got experiential. Oh, but you want me to actually do that and experience it. That end result may be a little bit different.
Absolutely. And you don't know how it's going to turn out until you try. But there is
Hmm.
evidence, a replicate study, peer reviewed, published research in combination with the University of California, Berkeley, and the Second City Improv Troupe out of Chicago. And what they found is when you gave participants in these activities a choice to choose something that they knew they would be more uncomfortable with, the level of intentional discomfort produced three results. They engaged longer in the task, they felt they had accomplished more, and they self reported a greater degree of improvement. So seek out opportunities not to just get outside your comfort zone and then jump back in. You've got to drag your comfort zone out away. You've got to expand your comfort zone. And
I think
that's how you grow.
I love that what you're saying there too. I mean, Tom, that makes so much sense. And I work a lot with parents, and that's one of the things that we see is parents aren't helping their children experience other things. Of course, we have the internet and the web, and they always play their games, but we need to get some limited time on that so they can still experience what's going on outside. Taking a walk, something as simple as that, going out and doing something, going to the park, experience, be experiential in what we're doing, because too many times we also get into things where people are saying a lot, but they're not showing it.
Yeah,
They talk well, but that experiencing or the experiential process may be somewhat limited.
right. So
Mhm.
that's how I try to differentiate what I do from other sources that might be out there. And look, there's lots of choices. I just know what I do,
Who
how I do it, and you know.
you do very well. Everything I've seen, you're a master at what you're doing. Who are the best individuals or maybe organizations that benefit the most from working with Dynamic Coach?
Well, it is recognized that communication is a key to success. So really, anyone can benefit from becoming a public speaker. That's why you have a 100-year-old international organization with more than 1,000 chapters around the world called Toastmasters. So
Mhm.
anyone can benefit from it. But I think specifically what I focus on, corporations, because I was in the corporate environment for 5 years. I played a direct role in planning and executing national and regional sales meetings and parsoning out these workshops. And then I gave those workshops myself. So I understand that environment, both from opening the meeting with a keynote speech and then following up with workshops that are planned on an individual small group level. But specifically, since I spent 20 years in pharmaceuticals, I know that industry, and
Yes.
there's a phrase that gets you credibility. I've carried a bag. I've gone
Mm.
into doctor's office with a bag of samples. I've sat in your seats. I know your world. So that's one area that I target, pharmaceutical sales, because I've been there. And then also what I found is technology. Some people, I minored in math and computer science. I actually got an A++ on my PO1 programming course. In 10 years teaching the course, the instructor had never seen such a tight, short, fast processing algorithm because I think extremely analytically. So
I love PO1. I loved it. I used to program in COBOL and PO1 and assembler. But
yeah,
yeah,
and for
PO1 was my favorite.
yeah, basic fortune, all that stuff. So I've somewhat followed technology over the years. I was a computer expert at almost every newsroom and every pharmaceutical company I worked with. So I speak geek. I understand it from the technical side, but then I can translate it into real world layperson's terms and focus on the ultimate impact. And that's a disconnect in the technology world. I
It
right now
is.
I think known in Miami as the pitch deck speaking coach for startup entrepreneurs in tech and AI. I will help you get in front of investors and convey your idea with passion so that the investors ultimately will accomplish that behavioral change that you talk about impact. Impact. There's no greater impact than changing someone's behavior. And ultimately in
And I do want
sales,
to get, go ahead, sorry.
that's what you have to do. So in the tech industry, I help people achieve the behavioral change of getting an investor to write a check and invest in that company.
I like what you're saying. If you happen to be in New Orleans on May 21st, I'll be speaking to the Project Management Institute there on Agile.
Wow.
Have you learned about Agile and in the iterative processing? That's one of the things about, was I talk about breaking things down to minimum viable product or service. I'd love to have you there. We will not,
Oh,
it will
let's
be
talk
recorded,
about that. Yeah.
but I don't think it's going to be right now. It's going to be online. But let me talk another way. I'd like about two more questions here, if you don't mind, just kind of fun questions,
Oh,
and then we'll
sure.
get more into impact.
Hmm.
But you do keynote speeches, you do group workshops, you do one-on-one coaching. Which of those do you enjoy the most and why?
That's such a tough question. It's like almost answering which is the favorite of your three children.
Good response.
So, so what I will say is I enjoy each of those activities for different reasons in a different way. But I will say it's all a continuum. Bring me in as a keynote speaker. I kind of set the tone, of course, in coordination with the meeting planners, put out the agenda, give a high level description of my process, my program. Then take you into the smaller group workshops where you actually have the experiential workshop where you come out of it actually being a better speaker. And then more focused individually, one on one, follow up with C suite, help them specifically prepare for their own presentations internally and externally. it's kind of a whole continuum, and then ongoing follow-up. I actually at my company, I actually introduced this concept and I changed the way we did training to emphasize more follow-up. I found data from Xerox Corporation, and you might have seen this data out there, that I think there's a 57% erosion of training if it's not followed up with
Mhm.
coaching. So that's what I started to do is I put systems in place after meetings to ensure follow-up, to continue to develop these skills, to maintain the level. You go out of a meeting and you go home and it evaporates. No, you got to follow up.
Yes.
So I would also do that as following up from the national meetings and the one-on-one meetings, continuing to remain on as a consultant for a period of time.
I like what you're saying, and I'm following in your footsteps because that's what I talked earlier about my workshops. Start building workshops, 2-day workshops, and they can be as long, short as 3 hours, up to the 10 hours for in the 2 days. Because that's exactly right. We've got to be reminded because it's so easier for many of us, again, because of our attention span we talked earlier. It's not because of lack of memory, but our attention span, we will lose some of that value.
Yeah,
But
so it's
let me
inevitable.
ask you, it is, you're right, it's inevitable. How has neuroscience, brain science, influenced your dynamic coach, your curriculum, and your methodology?
I wanted to look into what was the scientific basis behind things like retention and memory. So whenever I had a subject that I knew was important in the realm of public speaking, I would look up the science. And actually, that's now become even more important and
Yes.
accessible with AI. But I'll give you an example. We know conventionally that if you pause, you give people a chance to reflect on what you said. Well, it's interesting. The neuroscience, I heard about this in a second level training in my first pharmaceutical job almost 20 years ago. And the person that I later researched, and it was totally accurate, there's a process called looping. So you have this input stream, information coming in your ears, and then it goes out because other stuff comes in, right? There's a flow. And just like we were saying before about focus, if you stop that flow with a period of silence, the brain loops the last thing that you said.
Mhm. And that helps the memory to hang on to it
Yeah,
because
it can.
it's,
There's this whole process where it's called the phonological loop. It's kind of like when you get a song stuck in your head. If you give the audience listener time to process, the phonological loop references memory. Have I heard that before? Does that sound familiar? All right. And then ultimately it climbs up to the central executive functioning, where the decision is made. Should I devote the limited space of the hard drive of my long-term memory? Should I park this there for later retention? So you have to give the brain time to do that. So that's the neuroscience between pausing and retention. That's just one example of how how I've applied neuroscience. The other thing that's really interesting is storytelling. There's data showing brain scans of storyteller and listener start to synchronize. Storytelling creates a mind meld between storyteller and listener. Isn't that fascinating?
that is fascinating. And that's what, when I started writing actually my newsletter, I was much too technical. And people said, well, where's the story to this? And I said, what do you mean the story? What do you want a story about? But then as I heard that from more and more people, I started putting more and more about the human side of what was going on. So I definitely agree with what you're bringing forward.
Yeah, storytelling was human history before the written word. Stories
Good
down through
point.
10,000 years of verbal traditions. It's how we learn.
All right, well, let's talk a little about your impact. IMPACT model. You developed that proprietary method.
Mhm.
Can you maybe break down a little bit of it for us and share how and why it works?
Sure, absolutely. I wanted to offer a comprehensive but easily memorable system or model to cover all of the essential key elements. So I take a little bit of a grammatical liberty. I use the letter I to represent the word I because eye contact is critical. Think of what happens when you smile at a baby. What do they do?
Small back.
Right. Early in the neurogenesis of the human brain, even before we speak, we develop a specialized set of neurons called mirror neurons. It's how we use visual connection to recognize and reciprocate facial expression. That's how primary eye contact is. And then you also get feedback from your audience if you're looking at your faces. I always say, if you want to be a mind reader, be a face reader, because we do not wear our hearts on our sleeves. We wear our hearts on our faces. So by paying attention to the facial expression in your audience through your eye contact, you get instant in the moment feedback. M is for movement. Move your hands, move your face, move your body through your space, move your voice throughout its range. Just don't make it sound too strange. So, so those
I
are
like
all the
that.
different ways that you use movement to create dynamics, movement, motion. So, as I say, move your hands. Hand gesture is very important, but there can be too much of a good thing. You don't want to have jazz hands. Move your face. We just spoke about facial expression. Move your body through your space. I have a system for stage management, which I call step and stop. And I talk about how you can use the angulation of your face and your body to make everyone feel included in your audience. Move your voice throughout its range. Your voice is your primary instrument of communication. Vocal
Hmm.
variety is critical. And then you go on to P, which is pacing and pausing, like we just spoke about. A is for authenticity. Oscar Wilde said, just be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. C is for confidence,
I
which
love
I
it.
call the antidote to the fear of public speaking. You will not be afraid to do something if you are confident that you do it well. And I've got a very systematic process to improve your confidence so you conquer whatever level of fear you have. There's another myth. Fear is not our number one fear. I've been researching it for 8 years. That's a myth that came from data from 50 years ago, misinterpreted, and it's gotten viral. It is a substantial fear and it can be debilitating, but it's not our number one fear, and I've got a way
But
to deal with that. And then T is for telling stories, as we just discussed. So that's IMPACT.
that's excellent. I like the way you're putting that together. And I also like the way you continue mentioning Toastmasters. I am a DC Distinguished Toastmaster, DTM, and I think Toastmasters is awesome because it helps us with a lot of the things that you're talking about. But your
Right.
impact, the way you have laid that out, and help us memorize it, because for me, because of the attention, the ADD, attention deficit disorder, I need it written down first so I can see it and grasp it, get my attention span working on it. I like the way you do that, and I like the way you put that the I to start it,
Yeah,
I
and
the
the
movement.
IMPACT system, it's outlined on my website at dynamiccoach.com. Just click on impact and you'll get the high level abbreviated version of what each of those things stands for.
Excellent. Well, tell me, why do you believe communication is the most essential skill in both business and in life?
It's how we connect. You know, you're talking about unifying people in all different contexts. We connect through our communication, and that's the only way we can establish unity. That's the only way we can influence anyone. And when you speak, you know, that's why I really focus on impact. Now, you know, want, talk all day long, but if you're not having an impact, what's the point? So
Exactly.
I remind people, I kind of guide people through the 3 steps of impact or influence. You're looking for some kind of transformation. It starts with the cognitive. You tell people facts. You change what they know. You may even change how they think. That's all cognitive. The next step
Hmm.
is emotional. Maya Angelou famously says, people may not remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. So when we get information, we can feel something about it, and it can be positive and negative. As I coach my business entrepreneurs, how they want to make investors feel, you can use positive and excitement about, oh man, I want to get in less, versus negative. Oh, I'm afraid I don't want to miss out. So you can use the negative emotion for FOMO and induce them to number 3, behavioral change. Write a check, invest in my company. When we were developing learning objectives as a pharmaceutical national sales trainer, we would be browbeaten into writing the proper objective for our lesson. After this exercise, representatives will, and as you start, You say things like, well, they'll understand better. No, no. What's the behavioral change? Well, they'll be better to able to convey them. Well, ultimately, you have to focus on what the impact of the prescriber will be. They will better convince physicians who are concerned about safety to understand the safety profile of this drug and write it for appropriate patients. That is a behavioral change. That is the ultimate transformation. And when you look at leadership, leadership is ultimately about walking through those three steps and getting people to act differently, not because you want them to, but because you've been motivating them by their own self interest. You appeal to their needs and you get them to do what you believe is right because they want to, not
They
because.
want to because we can't motivate people. They have to motivate themselves, right? We can
Absolutely.
plant the seed. We can help them start. But the motivation itself has got to be almost self-endowed, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've heard you mention myths a couple of times as we've been talking today. What are some of the common myths about public speaking that you regularly burst in I think in your coaching sessions and the myths you're talking about today? What are a couple of them that we could share?
Sure. Remember, fear is not fear of public speaking is not the number one fear. That's
Yes, it
kind of
is.
hype, you know. But it is, like I say, it is real, and there are ways to conquer it. The attention span that came from a Microsoft study that only evaluated the amount of time people spent on a web page. It was internet engagement. It wasn't attention span. That's where that myth came from. And the idea of a goldfish, there's actually research that goldfish can remember good feeding spots for up to 3 years. So it's completely ridiculous that
Hmm.
goldfish has only a short-term memory span and that humans have a similarly short attention span. The data is not there to support that. In fact, there's academic research saying that you can keep people's attentions for as much as 45 minutes. And the key factor in whether a speaker can engage people and maintain their attention span, the number one factor is the passion and conviction of the speaker. Let's see, another myth. Oh, that this is a huge one. Have you heard this? That of our communication, only 7% is verbal, is the words, that the other 93% is nonverbal. That is a huge myth. That's from 50 years ago. This professor at UCLA, Albert Morabian, he was researching, and he was researching the verbal and nonverbal elements of communication. And I'll demonstrate why the myth is a myth. He was looking at, and he has said this, his data has been overgeneralized. He was specifically looking at the idea of liking, whether you like something. And he only analyzed
Okay.
single words. So he would say, outside of that context, that data is not validated, but he's an academic, so he has to come up with a formula, right? So here's what he found. When there's a conflict between the verbal, the word, and the nonverbal, either facial expression or tone of voice, yes, the nonverbal can overrule. And he has a statistical way to figure that out. So I'll give you an example. Single word, liking. I'll say the word great. Great. Right? It's not particularly emphatic, but you don't particularly have a reason to doubt the fact that I think what we're talking about is great. It's like not particularly expressive. What if I say, eat? All right, now my nonverbal, tone of voice, facial expression, body language, it emphasizes and reinforced the meaning of the word great. That tiger cartoon character, when he says, they're great, you know he loves that cereal. So there's no conflict there. So both the verbal and the nonverbal are 100% of the meaning. But what if you say something and I say, great, great? Oh, no, now you know that I don't think it's great. Sarcasm is specifically mentioned in Dr. Morabian's book, Silent Messages. Sarcasm is an intentional conflict between verbal and nonverbal, where the nonverbal is what comes through. So the message is don't get confused about all that math, the 7%, 93%. No, just make sure your verbal content is reinforced and consistent with your nonverbal signaling. You wouldn't get in front of a sales team and say, We beat our quota last quarter. Or next week, 100 of you are getting fired. You
How
know,
exciting.
it's a total disconnect. So that's really the take-home message from Dr. Morabian's research is just make sure, and this is where recording yourself and playing it back can assure that your verbal content and your nonverbal signals are aligned and support each other to drive home your message.
I like what you're saying. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is there's a little bit of emotional intelligence and emotional intelligence and intersecting with public speaking. And
Absolutely.
that's where, yeah, we have to reach our audience in the best ways possible. And that pause allows them to let that loop make it circle. So the emotional intelligence of them being able to understand what we're saying, and the way you were talking about, great, or that's great, being able to understand, have the intelligence to pick that up and hear that
Right.
from someone, right?
Yeah,
And
emotional intelligence is the key attribute. There's so much research showing that emotional intelligence is the key attribute for effective leadership because your subordinates are looking to you for non-verbal signals. So you've got to make sure that what you're saying is backed up by how you're coming across, how you're showing up.
hmm, it's obvious to a lot of us, and it's amazing sometimes that more of us don't pick it up. And how do we do that? And I guess it takes me back to what you're talking about storytelling. We only have about 8 more minutes, 7.5 more minutes. But if we can, let's touch on the storytelling and how that plays in successful communication. And how can some of us improve our storytelling ability?
I think the first thing is think of a Hollywood script. It's like a one-liner. Heiress or a high society lady falls in love with somebody low course on a doomed steamship. That's Titanic. So the first thing is summarize your story the way that a Hollywood script story would be summarized. Get it really tight so you understand what it is that you're going to convey. Then look at all the elements of drama. Pick characters, describe characters that your audience can relate to, that they can see themselves in. Describes situations that may resonate with the experience of your listeners. But I think the most important thing is there has to be some kind of driving force. It can be suspense, it can be amusement and comedy, it can be love and feeling and passion, it can be mystery, surprise. All of these drivers are what keeps people, cliffhangers. Oh, what's going to happen next? So you can create that tension and the drama, and the pausing actually is part of that, where you slow down and you make people wonder, oh, what's going to come next here? Right? We call that drama, suspense. So those are all the elements that coming into the storytelling. But the ultimate thing is what's cut to the chase, right? What's the point? What's the punchline? Where does the end come in? What is your goal in telling this story? What do you want the viewer, the listener to come away with? We call that, the life lesson or the fable or the moral of the story, right? Keep that in mind and begin with the end in mind. Know what your purpose
Absolutely.
is in even starting to tell the story to begin with.
Well said. Beautifully said. I always look at that too. Where's the hero?
Yeah,
Define what
there, there
the
could
hero's
be hero
problem in the
villain,
beginning.
right?
Go
There
ahead.
can be hero villain, or it can be a personal journey of just solo transformation. Yeah, so there's all these different ways to engage people in storytelling.
There truly is. There truly is. Tom, thank you so much for that. But tell me, looking ahead, what's next for you and Dynamic Coach? Any upcoming events or projects that you're working on, expansions that you're excited about?
Yeah, I do plan to launch a podcast and newsletter, and I've just trademarked the phrase speaking about speaking. That is mine. So if you hear someone
Excellent.
speaking about speaking, that's Tom Cobin and Dynamic Coach.
Okay.
And my goal is to really reinforce all elements of the model that I told you earlier, to seek more keynote speaking opportunities. I know from 20 years in TV, you got to have a good tape. So, as a new speaker, you have to start developing that material and getting those experiences on video and then put your tape together. So, that's my priority for this year, 2025. Start getting the keynote speaking engagements and then tie that into the workshops and then the follow up one on one and consulting. And I think also I am at the point where I'm learning about the technology in a way to most efficiently use it to build out my YouTube channel and then cross-pollinate with LinkedIn to start letting people know I'm here, enhancing their ability to find me and give me the opportunity to do for them what they want and what I know I can help with.
It is so true because if they can't find us, if we can't find them, how are we going to be able to help them?
Right, right,
How are they going to be able to communicate with us if we cannot connect?
right.
That is so true. Well, best of luck to you on that. I see so much that you're doing going forward. Congratulations on your quote, your wordage. That's excellent.
Thank you. And I
And
have to take a moment to sincerely thank you for giving me the opportunity to improve
oh,
my visibility and my ability to be found by being on your podcast. Just so the viewers know, we met through a speakers organization. And,
exactly.
a meeting where people get on the mic and on camera and practice and support each other. And that's how you and I started chatting. And you gave me this up in kind information, kind invitation, and I truly appreciate it.
And I appreciate you giving us the time to do this and to have this podcast and to share this information for so many of us that need it. Because there's no executive, the highest executive around, that can't learn more. And that's one of the things that I teach in being the bridge, build those real bridges between people, holding that unity. It's about all of us working together. But we've got about 2 minutes left. I'd like
Mhm.
to ask you this one final question. If you could leave our listeners with one actionable takeaway they can use to improve their communication today, what would it be, Tom?
I'm going to get silly and I'm going to show you. Do this. Deep breath. Oh, oh, oh,
Uh,
oh,
oh,
oh. Use
uh,
the entire range of your voice. Stop being so monotone. Monotone literally means one pitch and it's boring and it puts the viewer to sleep. Use more of your vocal range, especially online. People might not even be looking at you. Your face could be minimized because you're showing graphics, but they always hear your voice. And the single most powerful thing you can do with your voice is vary your pitch. I have an exercise where I present this sentence. I did not say he stole my wallet. And I go around the room and each person has to emphasize a different word. And they always use the exact same technique. They raise their voice and their volume. I did not say he stole my wallet. I did not say he stole my wallet. I did not say he stole my wallet. So by using your voice and your inflection and your pitch for emphasis, you differentiate the meaning that you want your viewer to take away from. That's the one thing I say everybody can immediately do to benefit.
I like that, and I still agree with what you're saying because if we're not emphasizing some part, some areas of what we're saying, where is the excitement from us that we're sharing to others?
Right. And the listener, the viewer is looking to you for signals on what to pay attention to. You have to guide them, and you do it with your voice.
You do. We do. That's what we have to do. And even for relationships that I deal with, business, for the office, for the social, we must share that point of excitement to show where we are and what we believe in, what we're going to share forward. Correct?
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right. All right, Tom, we have just a few seconds. I just want to tell you thank you again. Thank you for your time. It's a joy talking with you and hope we can keep this conversation going, the communication going. Best of luck with your new adventure, your speak. I'm excited to see it. I hope we can talk again and maybe I can be on one of your podcasts someday.
Absolutely. Open invitation as soon as I launch. But thank you again
Yes,
for giving me the opportunity to help your audience. I hope there's some value that everyone can take away.
I'm going to bet there is. I'll let you know as we get this out. It'll be out by Monday. I'll make sure everyone knows it's there. Let's work together. What we can do.
All
Build
right.
bridges, real bridges, bridges between people, building unity. All right, Tom. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Everyone, hope to see you next week. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye bye.